Thanks so much for having me. I just want to say thanks to Reitler, thanks Buddy, and the Sagamore Resort. This is awesome. Seek was started by people who are all really passionate about data and hate writing SQL. So I am our original founder. I started Seek 2021. My background, like it was said, I've led data teams at Citadel. I come from the hedge fund and trading world, and a couple of B2B SaaS startups. Before that was an astrophysicist at UCLA and Caltech, and kind of pivoted into quantitative finance. We also have Sarah Smith, our CRO, Roz, our head of AI research, and our head of engineering, Edward. Plus, we've invested pretty heavily in our AI team, coming from top schools like Stanford, Berkeley, NYU, Columbia. So that's a little bit about our team. Just a little bit more information about Seek. We already have customers ranging from startups to the Fortune 100. We've already converted customers onto the product. And we've raised over $10 million from Battery Ventures and Conviction Partners. Battery's pretty well known. Conviction was started by Sarah Goa, really talented VC that started it last year. We were actually her first investment from that fund. Would highly recommend looking her up if you haven't already heard of her. Also, obviously, ARC and Rock have been invested from the very beginning. And also all these great investors in the data space and AI space. We also got some pretty good press this year. We are in the so-called generative AI space, so we got a lot of really good buzz from all these publications. And so getting to the actual problem that we're solving. I was a data scientist and a quant before I started Seek. That's all I know. And I just kept experiencing the same problem pretty much everywhere I worked, which was I would be in the middle of what I wanted to be doing, which was finding alpha for the business by going through all of the data and just focusing on finding things we could trade on to make the company money. That's what I wanted to be doing. But I really couldn't get to those problems most of the day because I would have to basically stop and just help non-technical people answer the questions that they had about data. So, just to give you an example, I would get a question like, hey, data team, sorry to bug you again, but can you pull some stats that I can use to test this thesis? An example I was giving at the dinner last night, a real question I got from a fundamental investor was, hey, can you pull the market share of chicken sandwiches for these 5, fast food vendors? And I would have to kind of stop what I was doing, answer the question by writing a lot of very manual code and handing the data back. And oftentimes by the time I actually did the calculation and gave the data back to the person that asked the question, they didn't even need it anyway. Like, they just made a decision that was just not data-driven, which is really unfortunate because that's the whole point of why companies spend tens of millions of dollars or more on what's called the modern data stack, which is a data warehouse, and then you have your transformation layer, your ingestion layer, and then your dashboards. And it's like that all goes to waste when the data team answers these ad hoc questions, and then it takes 2 weeks to get back, and you don't even need it anymore. So that's basically the problem that we're solving. How are we solving it? This is with our natural language interface for data, and also what we call the Seek workflow. It's really easy to use. If you can use ChatGPT, you can use Seek. We're a natural language interface that anyone can use, especially non-technical people, but also data people can use it as well. And you just ask your question to Seek, the same way you would normally ask the data team, but you don't have to wait 2 weeks to get your answer back. You can get the data much faster and make a decision using the results. So how does it work? Like I said, we are technically a generative AI company. The specific application that we're using is using AI to generate SQL code and also expanding into Python code. So think about it this way. When a question comes in natural language, it goes into a large language model, and it can actually translate the request from natural language into a query that you can then execute on the data and get the data that you need back. So that's kind of how it works under the hood. We integrate with pretty much all the major data sources: Snowflake, BigQuery, Redshift, SQL Server. Just to talk a little bit about some of our product offerings, we have a Pro and Enterprise version in production now, in production with paying customers. We also have a free version that we plan on releasing that's coming soon. So the coming soon is a little misleading. The Pro and the Enterprise are available today, but the free is the one that's coming soon. We also have a ChatGPT plugin that we're testing out that's coming soon. And some of the KPIs that we've seen with our customers is that they can actually get the data that they need 60 times faster. So this is a real time savings that we're adding to our customers. Something that I think is really interesting to point out as a stat is the improvement in large language models at generating code. I want to talk a little bit about what I saw in 2020. So 2020 is when I saw GPT-3 come out for the first time. And that's when I really saw it generate code. And that's really when I was like, oh, wow, this thing is actually generating code that I used to, at the time, I was like, this is code I'm writing every day. But I actually, in 2019, a year before, I saw GPT-2. And so when I saw GPT-3, I was actually like, this is way better than GPT-2. And so a year later, I was still thinking about GPT-3, and that's when I quit my job and started to really learn about these models. So the reason I say all that is what I was seeing in 2021 was an improvement at solving this data set called the human eval data set. It's a set of coding questions that humans can do. They answer these questions, and you're measured by how many of these questions can you get right, okay? So in 2020, the state-of-the-art large language model, which at the time was GPT-3, or rather, yeah, it was actually GPT-3, believe it or not, it couldn't get a single question right on the human eval data set. In 2021, which is when I was quitting my job, the state-of-the-art large language model, Codex, could get over 70% of the questions right. So that's crazy, right? That's 0 to 70%. And now, actually, 2023, it's getting close to, I think, 90%. So that is just something I want to point out about, why is this possible today? That's basically the reason, is AI is getting so much better, and we can see that with ChatGPT as well. That's why it's such a phenomenon, because it's just something that exists now that you wouldn't have even thought of a couple years ago, or even 1 year ago. So the last thing I'll say is I want to talk a little bit about, when our marketing team was putting together this deck, they put in this piece called regenerative AI. And I was like, what's regenerative AI? But I thought about it, and I was like, this is actually really a good idea. These models have things called hallucinations. Like sometimes they just make stuff up, or sometimes they break. And so what would it mean to go from generative AI to regenerative AI? Models that can actually fix themselves or learn about themselves and understand why they're hallucinating and be able to course correct. That is something that we're really interested in solving. And so I decided to leave this in here because I was like, that's actually a really powerful idea for the future. So that's it for my slides. I'll be around after this to take any questions. So thank you very much.